How's it going, everyone? And here we go with Chapter 5, Video 2b. So when we left off in the last video, Julius Caesar had been assassinated. Caesar's enemies in the Senate feared that he would make himself a monarch, so they took it upon himself to prevent this from happening, and they stabbed him on the Senate floor. They hoped this would save the Republic, but it actually quickened its fall in the rise of the Roman Empire, which is what we're going to be starting off with today. So, as we said, Caesar's death did not end conflict in Rome. In fact, it only led to more fighting as two civil wars followed his assassination. When all was said and done after these wars, though, the winning faction was led by this guy Octavian. Now, Octavian was Caesar's grandnephew, and as the last man standing, the Senate gave Octavian the title of Augustus. Sorry about the pause there. Augustus means exalted one. He declared himself princeps, meaning first citizen. He was very careful to not call himself a king. The Romans still didn't like that title, and that goes back to the creation of the Republic. In reality, though, he had absolute power, just like a king. He was an emperor. So after 500 years, the Roman Republic was officially done, and the Roman Empire had begun. Now, Augustus had absolute power, but he was careful to not shake things up too much in the Roman government. He remembered what happened to his uncle Caesar when that happened. So creating a stable government was a priority for him. For example, he kept the Senate in place. Totally doing away with the oldest government institution from the Republic would have caused too much conflict. While he stripped them of a good bit of their powers, he didn't get rid of the Senate altogether. He also created an efficient civil service system. Now, in a civil service system, like the one in China, government jobs are based on talent and merit, not what social class you were born into. Let me just move me out of the way here. There we go. A census was also ordered. This is the picture that we have here. This is a scene of the census in the Roman province of Judea, the very famous census that resulted in Mary going into hiding because she didn't want the government to know about the birth of her son Jesus. So a census is a population count, which is helpful for keeping records of who should be taxed. So even though Augustus laid the foundation for a stable government that would last for generations, a problem still arose with the issue of succession. Succession means who's going to come next. You know, the Romans still didn't like the idea of power passing from father to son like in a true monarchy, so figuring out who would be the emperor remained a tricky subject for a long time. We'll talk a little bit more about that in later sections. Let's take a look at some of the other emperors. So not all of Augustus's successors were great rulers or even good people. Some were cruel or possibly even insane. Two great examples of that are Caligula and Nero. They were two early emperors that were borderline evil and pretty nuts in their own right. Caligula, for example, appointed his favorite horse. There you see him feeding his horse at this big party. He was known for having these big, extravagant and opulent parties. But that horse right there, he appointed as consul. So the guy that was in charge of the government and the military was an actual horse. And Caligula was notorious for the persecution of Christians. He also was blamed for setting a fire that destroyed much of Rome because he wanted to build more buildings. There wasn't any space for him, so he said, let's just burn a bunch of buildings down and we'll blame it on the Christians afterwards. Now, they weren't all bad, though. Between the years of 96 and 180 CE. So again, we're in the time after the life of Christ. So this is what we used to call the AD era. But from 96 to 180, this was the time known as the Good Emperors. Two examples of that. One is this guy Hadrian. Hadrian codified Roman laws, meaning he had them written down in all parts of the empire. He also had a wall built in the northern part of the province of Britannia. All right, so this is what Great Britain looks like today with Scotland, England, and Wales. And right here, this is where you had Hadrian's Wall. Still standing today. You got remnants of it along some sections in northern England that you can still go and visit. And as the border of Roman territory to some far off and wild land, the wall represented to Romans the edge of civilization. Now, another great emperor was Marcus Aurelius. Now, remember in the last chapter when we learned about the Greek philosopher Plato? Plato said that an ideal government was ruled by a philosopher king. Marcus Aurelius was the closest to one of those. When Marcus Aurelius Died, a period of Roman history known as the Pax Romana ended. The Pax Romana was a period from the reign of from Augustus to Marcus Aurelius. right? So from the first emperor up until Marcus Aurelius that we just discussed. Pax Romana translates to Roman peace. There you go. Pax, pace, peace. This was a time of relative peace, stability, and unity throughout the Roman Empire. So again, that's important to remember. It was a time of relative peace, stability, and unity throughout the empire. Now, this does not mean that there was no fighting at all. The Roman armies continued to fight and conquer in the constant expansion of Rome's territories, but it was a time of domestic or internal peace. You didn't have any of the civil wars or overthrow of governments like during the late days of the Republic. Even during the reign of the crazy emperors like Caligula and Nero, there was relative stability within the empire. Another thing, Roman law was upheld. It didn't matter where you were. Right? You see the size of the Roman Empire by 117 AD. Whether you were up here by Hadrian's Wall, whether you were in downtown Rome, or whether you were in the Roman province of Judea, the Roman legions, the Roman armies, they made sure that Roman law was administered and followed everywhere. Okay, anywhere that was Roman soil, that Roman law was administered, and that led to a tremendous amount of stability. Another thing that helped out Rome was economic prosperity. I'm just going to overlap this map real quick. I'll leave those up because it's not really that big of a deal. But you see the different trade routes that were throughout the empire, and you see all the different things that were being traded. Right? You have down here textiles and pottery from Egypt. You have even from Carthage, right? You still got some of that stuff. Wheat, you have wine being traded all over. You had stuff coming from the Far East. You had spices from India. You had silk from China that would be bought and sold in Roman markets. So the Roman armies and the upkeep of its roads that ensured that Roman trade would keep flowing, and it made Rome a very wealthy city. Now, one other major aspect of Roman society I want to discuss with you is the forms of public entertainment that was found in Rome and throughout the empire. Romans loved spectacular shows of entertainment, such as chariot races. Chariots they were originated for warfare, even hundreds of years before Rome. They were those things that the guys would ride in, being pulled by maybe 3 or 4 horses. Rome's largest chariot arena was the Circus Maximus. This is a computer kind of recreation of what it looked like. And it held over 100,000 people in its day. It was huge. It was bigger than your average football stadium today. It no longer stands, but we know how big it was based on the ruins where it once stood. You see, it's kind of like a walking track for people in Rome nowadays. Now, one of the things Rome was best known for are gladiator games, right? 2 guys just fighting to the death and killing each other. The Romans loved their blood sport. Many gladiators were slaves or prisoners of war, and they were very well trained in combat. They wanted to put on a good show. They battled each other in the Roman Colosseum, which the ruins of are still standing today. I'll put me right over there. Obviously, big chunks of it are falling apart, but it is a testament to Roman engineering that they were able to build something that's still standing about 2,000 years later. Now, a skilled gladiator could fight bravely enough that even if he lost, he could be spared by the crowd. You see this guy here. He is very clearly the winner. Disregard the bread and circuses thing. I didn't get up to that yet. There we go. This guy here is very clearly the winner, but he's looking towards the crowd to see whether the crowd would give them the thumbs up or the thumbs down. If this guy down here who is defeated, if he fought bravely, maybe they would still give him the thumbs up. And if a gladiator won enough, he could possibly win his freedom. So all these forms of entertainment were used as distraction for a lot of the problems Roman society was having. And that's very important to remember. This is known as bread and circuses. This term means that even though there were a lot of very serious problems faced by Roman society, such as overtaxation, a growing gap between the rich and the poor, stuff like that, the Roman government gave the people food and entertainment, right? The bread and the circuses. The entertainment were the chariot races or the gladiator games. Bread would often be given out these events, literally just given out. But this was all a distraction. It was distraction to make sure that the poor people didn't get too worked up. Sure, the poor people went to a show, were entertained, and left with bread to feed them for that day, but nothing was being done to help them long term. And these issues would eventually cause tremendous problems for Rome. But that is a discussion for a later chapter. So that's going to wrap things up in section 2. And then in the next video for section 3, we're going to talk about some of the achievements of Roman culture.